Am I enjoying the Amplitude remake for PlayStation 4? I feel weird for saying this, but yeah, I'm having a ton of fun. Amplitude is a rhythm game from Harmonix. The original Amplitude came out for PlayStation 2 and it became somewhat of a classic, but I've never had the chance to play it back then, so I decided to pick this one up and see what all the fuss was about. And I totally get it. If you're not familiar with how this game works, think of games like Guitar Hero or Rock Band, but instead of just playing the guitar or the drums, you're playing all the instruments at the same time. And the cool thing is that you can kinda shape the music as you go by choosing which instruments you focus on. Let's say you missed some notes on the drums, well, suddenly the drums disappear from the song. But even if you don't miss a single note, there are times where you can only play 2 or 3 tracks max, so you choose what you want to hear during that section. Do you want those sweet drum and bass beats or something more melodic with a vocal track and synths? You get to choose, and it's really satisfying listening to the game and the music respond to what you do. I did ask myself the question of whether or not this game made sense in a world where rhythm games have evolved so much, because there was no Guitar Hero or Rock Band when the original Amplitude came out, so is there enough difference to justify this game's existence in 2016? And I'd say yes. As opposed to Guitar Hero and Rock Band, this game was tailored to be played with a controller from the get-go, so you don't need to buy any peripherals. And while I found the controls to be a bit awkward at the start, I went into the options and there's a good amount of different configurations that should suit your needs. Once I found mine, everything just kinda clicked and it works really well. I think it's very easy to sneer and say, oh, it's just another rhythm game, But from time to time, I do like to engage with these type of games, and I guess that's why I feel weird about liking it, because I simply did not expect to enjoy it this much. The more I play, the better I get, and I can feel it. I can see that I'm becoming a better player just by playing more of it. And there's definitely a feeling of accomplishment when you finally beat a track that you've been having trouble with, or when you set a new high score. And at this point, I've only played about 3 hours of it, but I've already beat the campaign on intermediate level, and there are 2 more difficulty levels above this, and I can see that taking a ridiculous amount of hours to master. I tried a track on expert, and oh my god, was I overwhelmed. There's definitely a lot of longevity here. And then there's the multiplayer, which I was blown away. It's so different, it's unique and competitive, which usually doesn't happen much in rhythm games, at least not the way it happens with Amplitude. Up to 4 players can play the same track, but as you play different instruments, just like in single player, portions of the highway will vanish, limiting your options on which tracks you can play at any given time. And this is important because if 2 players are on the same track, only the player in front will get the points for hitting the right notes. But then there's a ton of power-ups that you can use to mess with your opponent. Like you can disrupt their track, making it harder for them to see their notes. You can eject them from the track that they're currently on. It's more fun than it appears to be at first glance, but more importantly, like I said, it's unique, a breath of fresh air. I've never seen competitive multiplayer like this, and it's only a shame that there's no online multiplayer. And there was online multiplayer on the original Amplitude, but this time it's local only. I guess you could play online with SharePlay, but that's usually not ideal, especially in a rhythm game where any kind of latency will just ruin the game immediately. If I had to point out any negatives on the game, besides the online multiplayer thing, it would be that sometimes you can't see the first note on the next time measure when the tracks are really far apart. If you want to play a song perfectly, you gotta know which note comes next. But sometimes you've been clearing out tracks and turns out that the next track is really far from the one you're playing, and the camera just doesn't reach it. So you change tracks and you try to guess what the first note on the other instrument is. And this could be a design choice to make you try to play the instruments in a different order so this doesn't happen, but I like the option to choose which instruments I play. And if this sends me down a path of playing the game more linearly, I'd say it's a bad design choice. And it could be fixed very simply by including a more zoomed out camera like the one we have on multiplayer. But on single player, you only have 2 cameras, and the second one is even closer to the highway, so that only makes things worse. I can see this problem being very frustrating when you're trying to master songs at a higher difficulty, but as I said, I'm still practicing on intermediate. Another negative, I guess, would be the track list itself, though this is highly subjective and personal. I like a lot of electro, drum and bass, even some techno. But I only enjoyed a couple of tracks in the game, and that really comes down to personal preference. I cannot objectively say the rest of the tracks were bad, but even when playing the tracks that I didn't like, the gameplay itself, the choosing of instruments, timing the notes perfectly, flying around, using power-ups was still tons of fun. I guess it could simply be better if I enjoyed the songs a bit more. That said, this is a blast. If you're a fan of rhythm games, you should definitely check this out. It's 20 bucks on PSN, and even though there are only roughly 30 tracks in the game, the 4 difficulty levels will be enough to keep you going for a very long time. Have you played Amplitude yet? Did you play the original on PlayStation 2? Let me know what you think of this remake. I'd be really curious to read some of your guys' opinions in the comments below or at Twitter at magical_noob. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing for even more gaming goodness. And until next time, I've been Globku. Boy!